Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I've got the mould finished for the nose cone. It's time to see if we can get the buck out of the mould and hopefully maybe even get a cast off it and see what it looks like. See you in a minute. Okay, so it's the day of reckoning for the mould. I've got to strip it out and see if it works at all. Before I disturb it at all, because the two halves are now there and they've been curing for a day or so, I want to do a couple of things. I want to drill about half a dozen holes through the two halves, just so that I can bolt the mould together if it comes apart successfully. So it clamps the two halves together. So I'll do that first, and then I'm going to just run round the jaggedy edges, because I suspect it will certainly have joined itself together right at the outside edges anyway. But I'll just want to clear it up because all this stuff is quite nasty on your fingers as well. So we'll just drill the holes first, that way at least they're registered exactly right. Now again, I've got no knowledge, but having just seen others do it, just going to use a little multi-tool to try and cut the shape out. It's that or something in the angle grinder, I think, but I think this might be a slightly less intrusive way of doing it. What's encouraging about that is that the two layers of stuff are coming apart at where it's not connected by the fabric on the outside edge, and it's leaving with a nice finish, so that's a good start. Except I've filled my mug of coffee with bits of ground glass and dust. So next on the procedure, I think, is to take it off this backboard and see if it'll split away from that, and then I can trim up the bottom edges, which are less important. Do is just pull it out and just push it away from the edges. Seems to be coming off nicely. Okay, second stage, so far so good. And again we'll go back and trim out the surround. So I'm guessing the next thing I need to do is to try and split the mould and get one half off. I'm not quite sure how I do that. It probably wants some sort of wedge to go in between the two halves. And maybe a gentle bump with a hammer. Certainly along that back edge where I stuck the extra bit of polypropylene on, it should come away quite well, because that was just daubed on with a bit. I think the mould will come away with the polypropylene in it, but it's not moving otherwise. So time to get some wedges in of some sort. Maybe a chisel into the gap. That's splitting along the join line nicely, and at the registration points as well. That's good. May well damage the gel coat here, but it doesn't matter because it's on the interface join between the two sides. It's not actually where anything is going to be moulded. One of the joys of tidying up the garage and getting it all sorted is that I can now find things. I have got some plastic wedges from Screwfix that are used as spacers, but they've got a tapered end on them. I think that's going to be a far better thing to use around the edges, because it won't damage the gel coat, or it shouldn't damage the gel coat, I hope. If I can just knock these in and start to split it. Yeah, it's starting to move, even though it shatters the spacer. It's not really a problem. Starting to move. Certainly had some damage to the buck anyway from the amount of plaster that's come out, but that was always the idea. There are all the spacers. It's making a mess, but it's getting there. We've got all of the foam and the shuttering still inside, but I think that's the important thing, to get it out first. Okay, not quite what I was hoping for, but Let's see how easily this comes out. Now, with a bit of cleaning up, scratching around, we've got the remnants of the old mould out, the buck. Just going to see if I can clean this gel coat up a bit. You can see the advantage of the PVA finish because it's left like a polythene bag over the whole of the surface. So hopefully that will give me a nice gel coat underneath. There's a lot of cleaning up to do, but just want to see what we get, and there will need to be a bit more work done on it. Polish it here and there, but no, that's fine. That will come up clean. A bit of isopropyl alcohol ready to wax once I've got all the remnants of the paint from the original buck, and clean a few bits up like that where there's been a small gap and resin's gone in, gel coat's gone in. Just needs to be tidied up, polished back. A little bit of surface paint left from the original. But yes, on the whole that is good. Ready to clean up, and we can wax it and put another gel coat back in and make a start on moulding. Right, on to the second half before we get too far into that one. Well, that's one fight I really don't want to be having again. I think that's served its purpose. Right, so a bit of cleaning up. There's still some work to do on this. There's areas where, for instance, I stuck that plate on the back and it's got pretty badly jointed around the edges there, which will cause something to stick in that, I think, if I use it for taking a mould off. So there's work to do on that. There's still a lot of the PVA to take off. Still a lot of peeling off to do, and around the edges it seems to have gone quite rough on the joint all the way around. I don't know what I've done there, but I'm going to run around that with wet and dry and then polishing compound to polish it back up. but really on the whole, given what it's there for, I'm very happy with it. I've got two small cracks in the edge where there are effectively joints in the fabric. When I was pulling the mould off, I've cracked it there and there. Again, it shouldn't matter because it's where the joint joins, where the bottom is, I mean. I'll stiffen that up when I'm doing the actual next casting of it, or the first casting of it. But in the meantime, I'm just going to spend the rest of the day cleaning and tidying and getting it ready. What we'll do is put it back together. The registration holes work well. It slots together nicely. I can then just put the screws through there, fill whatever joint there is there with a bit of wax, and then start and lay this up as a nose cone. I'm happy with it's not perfect. It was never going to be perfect because that's the first time I've ever done this, and you're not going to be perfect the first time you do something. It's certainly not worth my while doing this for a tail, I don't think, because it's going to have to be too big, and certainly the problems I had getting that out were quite considerable. But I've learnt something new, and we've got pretty much successful doing it, so I'm happy with that. Yeah, that's got the mould waxed. I've done what I can to sort out any of the rough areas by just wet and drying it and polishing it up as far as I can. It's going to be a bit rough, but given that the whole thing is going to have to be filled and sanded or primered, certainly prior to use, I'm going to have to do a certain amount of work on it. So I'm just about ready to put the final coat of PVA on top of all the wax now. I've rounded off some of the corners in the mould with wax just to help with the stripping out. It should be easier to get out than the buck, in that the buck was solid and it therefore was difficult to get the release, whereas if I put glass fibre on the inside of it, I should be able to at least pull it away from the edges. But we will see, time alone will tell. This is still a learning exercise as much as anything. But we'll put the PVA on, and then we can get a gel coat on this hopefully today and see where we go from there. It's quite interesting that the PVA coat is not sticking or not bonding to the gel coat anything like as well as it did on the buck, which tends me to think that the waxing on the gel coat has done a far better job than it did on the original buck paint. So I'm sort of hoping that it means it'll strip much better because it's less inclined to hold on to things, because I'm really struggling to get the PVA to even stick to it. It just keeps grinning back and coming away. So I've put a couple of potfuls of this on. Hopefully it will do something. But if it doesn't, as I say, I'm hoping it's the fact that the waxing of the original mould on the gel coat is a far better non-stick surface than the buck. And so we get on to the final knockings, I think, of getting this done. I'm getting the gel coat onto the mould prior to doing this last cast off it, or the first cast off it I should say. We will get a layer on and then see how it behaves when we put the fabric on top. But we're nearly there, I think, with our deliberations. Biggest difficulty with this is seeing where you've done. Black on black, it doesn't work as well as it has done up to now, because I've always had a reference point that's a different colour. But we'll see how we get on with it anyway. It's probably a lesson for the future to either make the moulds in a different colour or use a different coloured gel coat, because it's not the easiest thing to see. That's the coupling coat on. Right, so it's the day of reckoning. I've had one layer of the thicker cloth and one layer of the thinner cloth on this. I don't know whether it will be a success or not. I suspect not, because it's the first one out of the mould, but we'll have a look and see. I had a bit of a problem when I was laying up the thin glass fibre coat, in that I put it on top of the gel coat just to place it, which was still slightly tacky, and then when I went to move it, because it was in slightly the wrong place, it actually lifted the gel coat from the mould. So I don't know what state we're going to be in with this, whether or not it actually went back down nicely and has settled down okay or not. I ran out of the first coat of cloth just when I'd finished the first coat, so I hadn't got any more. So again, ideally I wanted to put two layers of the very thin weave on. So it's a bit of a bodge in many respects. But what was encouraging by the fact that the gel coat came away from the mould was the fact that it came off that easily. It shows that it's not sticking. The other problem I had was that when I came back to the PVA mould release agent, it was just literally running off and pooling at the bottom. It really did not want to stick to the wax at all. So there's a series of, I won't call them excuses because they're not, but there are a series of reasons why this might not be hugely successful. But that's always the way with anything new, I suppose, and if we can get something out which vaguely resembles a nose cone, it will help me get on with the front end of the cart, even if it's not the finished one. I can then send off. I need to get some more supplies anyway of the finer fabric, cloth, and some more brushes. So it's been a learning exercise from that point of view. But we'll crack the mould. Oh, and the other thing I've done is, of course, I've wrapped the cloth around at the back edges, which is not what it needs to be, and that might not help either. It actually will just finish at the mould edge. So, last bolt out. And I'm hoping it will be more easy to strip out than the buck, because being a thin layer I should be able to just lever it away from the face of the mould better. So first step is just to try and crack the mould apart, I think. Perhaps just lose this edge. Yeah, that's probably the first mistake I've made, wrapping it round when I don't need to, because it's an extra area to stick to. Right, something just went pop and it's gone. Let's have a look and see what we have. Wow. Okay. That's encouraging. I've resorted to the spacers again that I used before, because they're plastic and they shouldn't cause as much damage, but this one is certainly fighting me more than the front one actually, which is not what I would have thought, although there's a lot more straight sides in this, so you don't get the draw on the mould like you do with the other. She's gone. Now you can see it's actually stuck there on a couple of places. Not that any of that matters, because that's at the bottom. The frame rail cuts out there, and then the front of the axle cuts out there. So, well, it's not very good along that joint, but I always knew I'd got a problem there. That was the mould rather than anything else. But that, whatever its imperfections, is a nose cone. So we're just going to clean that up now, get all of the PVA off, get all of the wax off. Some of the PVA obviously stuck, even though it wasn't, didn't appear to be. And that's left me with quite a nice finish. I say I wasn't too worried about the finish really, because it's going to have to be sprayed anyway. But that I'm pretty pleased with. Okay, so we've got the glass fibre nose cone done. I'm happy with that. That's suitable enough for what I want it for, particularly as it's a first attempt, so I'm very pleased with that. There's a lot of cleaning up to be done around that joint, which I knew would be the case because the mould was slightly damaged. And there's a tiny bit of repair I've got to do on one corner of the mould on the gel coat before I use it again. Clearly I've been a little bit hungry on the amount of gel coat I've put on here and there, a few patches where the resin is grinning through, but it's strong enough, it's light enough. I was a bit worried it wouldn't be enough with 2 layers of one thin and one thick, but that's plenty enough for what we need it for. I've got to cut the hole out in the front for the grill. I've got to cut all the underneath out to get the front suspension axle frame rails out as well. Do that next time on when I'm doing anything on this. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart, and we'll see you then. Bye.